think it's much more like a termite mound. It's all to do with the whole thing being greater than the sum of its parts.
A termite colony is extraordinary. It is as intricate and as complex as a city. It can dominate whole areas of the bush and wage war against other insects. Above all, it can build these stupendous structures with columns and buttresses and air conditioning ducts. So where is the knowledge for this incredible organization kept?
Not in an individual worker termite. They are supremely dim, with a brain the size of a pinhead. Nor in the enormous, squirming, egg-producing queen. Her brain is even smaller than a worker's. No, the intricate behavior of the termite colony emerges from the collective effort of all the termites. Here a group of worker termites are constructing a new wall. Not a single one of them carries a blueprint for the wall, but working together it gets built. The termites send out chemical signals, and between them they pile up their tiny mouthfuls of mud.
Clearly, the human brain is totally different from a termite mound. Both are composed of numerous building blocks, either neurons or termites. Each, when acting in harmony, is capable of extraordinary feats. It makes no sense to search for the root of knowledge in single neurons in the brain, or for that matter, in one termite in a colony. The success of both depends on many millions of simple units working together.
So, it's teams of neurons acting in unison that give us all our skills. Each team, based in a particular region of the brain, takes on a different responsibility. From our most advanced human abilities, such as language and memory, to the more basic ones, like movement. Because we walk, run and reach without thinking, we forget how such incredible precision is possible. To see just how much brain effort is required, look what happens when we're plunged into a totally new environment.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. Okay.
Astronauts have to learn to move from scratch when they enter a world without gravity. The reason why we're able to learn new tasks and carry them out automatically lies here. It's a part of the brain called the cerebellum, or little brain, because it sticks out right at the base of the brain proper. Here are stored the practice movements we all learn, be it riding a bike, playing the piano, or even fixing a satellite. The astronauts are in the cargo bay of the shuttle, but they're not out in space. This is the closest they can get to space back on Earth. An enormous swimming pool, a pool so large that 4 space shuttles can fit inside it. Here, astronauts can practice their tasks over and over again until they can move automatically without thinking.
I have to jiggle it a little bit to get it to walk.
And it is finicky about being directly perpendicular to the rail when it goes on. So try to wiggle it back and forth from starboard to port and also from forward to aft.
Okay.
We're also assuming that the latches on board didn't work.
So they're manually.
Marcia Ivins is one such astronaut. Talk about seeing the world. She's been on 4 shuttle missions and orbited the planet 683 times.
Learning to deal with the absence of gravity takes a little bit of getting used to. We are used to walking from place to place when we go someplace, and you don't walk, you float or fly. So when I want to go from here to across the room or across the cabin, I will push off with my hand or my feet. If I push off too hard, I smash into the wall. If I don't push off in the right direction, I miss the wall. And if I don't push off hard enough, I don't quite get to the wall. So that takes a little bit of getting used to.
Once we've practiced a skill enough, the cerebellum can take over automatically. A thought starts it off, and then the cerebellum does the work, sending out instructions to the rest of the body. This happens without us even being aware of it. In fact, the unconscious part of the brain is often more skillful than the conscious part. On the space shuttle is a robot arm. The astronauts have to train hard to operate it using a joystick. But the secret with moving the robot arm smoothly is not to think too much about it. Let the cerebellum take over.
For me to learn to use the arm, it was difficult to think about moving each joint as I moved it. And finally, one instructor said, just do it. Just put your hands on the controls and move it. And I just did it. And I don't even know how that works, and it got there. And the more experience you get, the more rotations and translations you can make at the same time. And that's probably true of learning to use your hand. You know, when you reach for something, you make very complex motions with your arm, and that's probably as learned a response as it is learning to control the robot arm in here.
The astronauts use the same mental equipment to control the robot arm as we first use as babies to control our flesh and blood arms. People have a fantastic ability to make almost any tool an extension of their bodies. As an infertility doctor, I make full use of my cerebellum to perform keyhole surgery. Here, I'm investigating why a woman is unable to conceive. The surgical tools allow me to examine inside her without resorting to major surgery. After enough training, it's relatively simple for me to coordinate what I do with my hands with what I see on the screen.
Truth is that this surgical manipulation, like all surgical manipulation, looks incredibly skilled and very intricate. But actually, most of the time you're doing it totally on autopilot, and you can do quite involved procedures without really thinking about it. It's only when there's something untoward or the surgeon hits an emergency that suddenly you need to concentrate much harder.
And the conscious brain takes over.
Most mammals have a cerebellum just as developed as ours. A rat's primitive brain is largely cerebellum. They don't need much more for their relatively simple lives. And in humans, the basic design of this rudimentary part of the brain has changed little as we've evolved. It is the rest of our brain that has enlarged so massively. Why did it get so big? Well, surprisingly, a whole quarter of our oversized brain is devoted to vision, much more than for any of our other senses.
What you see when you peer into the back of the eye is the only part of the brain which is visible from the outside world.
The optic nerve at the back of the eye is a direct extension of the brain. Traveling along the optic nerve, we pass right through the brain. Here, at the back of the head, is where the visual information arrives. Our eyes are just a window. We actually see with our brain. It's difficult to grasp just how complicated vision is until you try to program a computer to see. It's staggeringly difficult. What the scientists hadn't realized was that the eye is merely the first step. The brain does most of the real work. These robots have excellent cameras on board, but they lack the clout of the brain to make sense of what they see. This can be a handicap. Our brains are so powerful, we very much take our visual skills for granted. To fly this 1940s biplane, Marsha Ivins relies more on the view from the cockpit than the instrument panel.
In an airplane like this, vision is your primary means of knowing where you are relative to the world in the airplane. My brand of flying doesn't really require a whole lot of dials. I can tell as I come closer to the ground what my rate of descent is, and that a pilot learns with experience. So I make periodic checks for the altimeter and the airspeed and the vertical speed indicator for that information, but mostly I do that by looking outside.
Whenever we look around us, we see the world instantly. The shape of a plane, its movement, its color. But what's surprising is that all these aspects of the image have to be processed by the brain separately. We know these various elements of vision are distinct because certain people with brain damage are missing one of them. Some cannot discriminate color, while more bizarrely, others are unable to perceive motion. It's as if they're seeing a stationary snapshot of the world every couple of seconds. But in normal vision, our powerful brain combines all these disparate elements into one coherent view of the world. As the brain power of our ancestors increased, they not only observed the world, but also invented ways of shaping it. We can see this in action by looking at the tools that chimps make. The chimps from this group use an impressive 19 types of tool. Most of them are to get at food. Thin sticks help them catch ants and termites. Chimps even use stone anvils and wooden hammers to crush the shells of nuts.
It's jolly difficult making a stone tool. So here's one that was prepared earlier.